Judith Hill is an award-winning author of 11 books, including Medical Astrology, Your Guide to Planetary Pathology, Astrology and Your Vital Force, Healing with Cosmic Rays and DNA Resonance, The Lunar Nodes, Your Key to Excellent Chart Interpretation, Eclipses in You, Vocational Astrology, The Part of Fortune in Astrology, Astroseismology, Mars Redheaded Files, and the acclaimed classic, The Astrological Body Types. She created the Renaissance Medicine Conference and produces Medical Astrology 101. Hill served as the educational director for the San Francisco National Council of Geocosmic Research. As a road-tested astrologer, she successfully matched 5 charts to 5 biographies in 1989 NCGR-sponsored Skeptics Challenge, and successfully predicted and pre-published the magnitude, general time, and location of California's famous Loma Linda earthquake. She is also an internationally recognized pioneer of astroseismic and astrogenics research. Hill is a chartered herbalist with the Dominion Herbal College and a guest teacher with the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbal Medicine. Hi, Judith.
Hi, Sally.
So happy to see you.
Yeah. So we're going to have a lovely little examination today of medical astrology.
Yes.
And introduce this to your audience. And it's a wonderful, very ancient science that never died. There's always been doctors that have continued this practice into the present time, but usually very quietly so.
How did you actually make this your specialty? How did you delve into this?
Well, I've always loved herbology very, very much. And I've been reading charts professionally since age 14, actually professionally. I had a very long training that started at age 10. But always in my mind, I was always very much admiring people who could have real skills. They could make saddles, and they could farm, and they could cook, or they were weavers, and this just, I kept thinking, I want astrology to be something very, very useful. And as I got older, I discovered that astrology was very useful in the Renaissance and medieval era, so much so that the physicians of the era had to have their exams passed in astrology to get their medical licenses until 1666. And that the average astrologer could do everything from diagnose, prescribe, also find lost dogs, help with real estate sales, also study the vocation. What should your son go into at that time? And so I also specialize in all the practical arts of astrology, including vocation and many others. So that's how I got into this. And then I began diligently studying herbs, which is what the medical astrologers had to also know. It was a relation of herbs and medical astrology that formed the basis of the medical system of Europe from probably around ancient Greek times is when it began. So it really started getting going around 400, 300 BC. Was a fully defined system by the time of Christ. And then by the time it got into, it sort of flowered in, it's probably total flowering with medical diaries and so forth, was probably in the 1600s. But had a very big flowering in the Arabic era, 600 AD on, Common Era. So I might go into history if you want later, but the Arabs and the Jews had a great deal to do with this system, though it was really the bare bones of it developed in ancient Greece. And then it flowered into an amazing herbal science with many other features in medieval and Renaissance Europe. So it's a very long ancient tradition with its roots in ancient Greece.
So now in common day, is it still used? How can it enhance our life today? Are people still using the science?
Oh yes, it has so many wonderful uses. I'll name a few. one of the best, Sally, is in selecting safe surgery dates. Why go into surgery? If you astrologers out there, why go into surgery on an eclipse, a full moon? There's all kinds of rules. And actually, in my book, Medical Astrology, A Guide to Planetary Pathology, there's a wonderful 2 chapters on very detailed on how to select a safe surgery date. And I will be giving a lecture on that at NORWAC this year. But besides that, the chart, there's natal and there's transit. You can look at a natal chart to see the parts of the body that have a tendency for disease, and it's very accurate. I've done many double-blind tests. I'm a great skeptic. It is, in fact, astonishingly accurate. And you can also tell what energetics are behind an illness, if it's too hot, if it's too cold, to help. The doctors used to use this for deciding on which herbs to use or what treatments. And then using the transits, you can tell what's happening right now. One thing, Sally, is that in the old days, they had many, many more etiologies. That means causes of disease. And one of them, about 70 etiologies, one was called astrolic, or caused by the stars. And we all know that sometimes you get a transit and it manifests physically. But besides that, astrology was used to look at the chart and tell which of the other etiologies was happening. Was this physical? Was this caused by supernatural sources, which they considered as real? Was it caused by food? Was it caused by your parents? They had noxious air. Constipation was a big one in those days. They actually would discover if that was the cause of the person's illness, because they had terrible diets in England at that time, all meat and bread in the Shakespeare era. So anyway, there's many, many, many wonderful uses. And then for you herbalists out there, it can't be beat. The moon and the moon's aspects are used for harvesting, planting, decocting, and the proper times to administer your herbs. So there are so many fantastic. Now for that, I've probably the best compendium, one of them, there's many others as well, but the best compendium for times for using for herbal use. In chapters on the moon in astrology, and your vital force has chapters on the moon's aspects and what herbs, for timing, for harvesting, decocting, administering your herbs. And in this way, you have super herbs. You have a very, very effective herbal medicines. And
let me ask you a question. These books that you're showing us, are they available on your website?
They are, but they're actually cheaper and faster delivery from either Amazon or Barnes and Noble. And
okay.
You can also see the reviews and there as well. I don't mind shipping them out from here, but people will have to wait. And but yeah, I say go to Barnes and Noble and Amazon.
Okay.
Portland here, a New Renaissance Bookshop has them, and Powell's has a few of them sometimes. You know.
Okay. Just wanted to kind of clear that up, because I know that we're talking about a lot of books here.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's great. Are there any other examples that you wanted to use? I didn't want to interrupt you, but I did want to get that out of the way.
Well, there's many, many other ways you can use medical astrology, and because this summit is about enhancing your life. Mm-hmm. So one of the best ways is to know your monthly rhythm and your yearly rhythm. So the book, The Astrology and Your Vital Force, has 2 chapters on your yearly rhythm, because they know now statistically that people tend to die more often when the sun, like near your birthday, or when the sun is opposing your opposite, your anti-birthday, and it's amazing how often the sun is squaring your sun. But there's a couple days in the year called quincunxes. They're about roughly 150 days away from your birthday, or 270 days away from your birthday. But you have to fine tune it. It's going to be within 5 days of that. And those few dates, you're very, very vulnerable, because your vital force, your internal battery of energy that you're born with, goes down. And then on other days, it goes up. when the sun is in the same element, if you're, water sign, if you're a fire sign, earth sign, air sign, and the sun is in those elements, your vital force goes up, especially if it's exactly trining your sun for you astrologers. And if you can find a healer or a spouse that is born with their sun trining your own sun within a day or two, you're a lucky patient, because that person, even if you don't like them, they have an ability to heal you. And I discovered this was true because I had 3 individuals who miraculously healed me by touching when the doctors couldn't. And I went later and got their birthdays. They were all born exactly 120 days away from 20 degrees, astrological degrees away from me. And their suns trine me in the same way. And this is wisdom from the ancients. But there was a man named William Gray, a great healer. And there's a book on him you should all read called Born to Heal by Ruth Montgomery. And he did everything astrologically. He healed people. This is the most amazing thing, Sally. He said he was such a wonderful healer. He would come out of his hotel and there'd be a mob waiting for him. He worked for the army. He worked for the police. He would heal people instantly of all kinds of neurological illnesses. He said he did this by putting his head on their chest and picking up the astrological resonance of their 10-day period of birth, called the decan or decan. And then he would take that energy, and he had an ability to pump it back into them. Pump their own energy back into them, and they would miraculously heal. And actually, my book, Astrology and Your Vital Force, discusses a way you can do that now that William Gray has passed. He didn't tell us how he did it, but there's a book on it, and it was observed by the head surgeon of 5 hospitals who work closely with him. And everybody should know about William Gray. And William Gray wrote a little book called Know Your Magnetic Field. And it's really based on astrology, his healing method. But so if you know your solar year, now a very strong, healthy, person, it doesn't really matter if you have little fluxes in your vital force in the month, in the day. However, if you are a frail person, if you are convalescing, you're still in the hospital. Don't let him out of the hospital today. It's the quincunx. It's the one, the day of the quincunx, the day of the opposition. Don't let them out yet. So it gives you a real help. And you can, in the old days, they would use astrology to tell the progress of the disease. They could tell if it was mortal. The person, in the old days, people died before 40 most of the time. Everything killed us. Toothache would kill you. They didn't have proper antibiotics. So they would tell if the disease was very dangerous or not. Now, in my work, I've been able to save 3 lives with this so far. Because
Wow.
I could see something in time that the doctor could not see. And one, do you want me to tell a story?
Yes, of course.
Well, one of the stories I remember, a woman here in town, she was an astrologer. Actually, I'm going to tell the story about the gentleman. Gentleman here in town who had called me and said, they want me to come in for exploratory bowel surgery. It's up to me. They left it up to me. They said, oh, sure, take your Hawaiian vacation, or was Tahiti or something. And he had worked very, very hard for this vacation. And so he said, can I go take my, month vacation, or should I have surgery right away? Because they left it up to me. I looked at the horoscope and it looked like he'd be dead in 2 days. I said, you need to go in right now and take it. So he decided to do that. He listened. And normally, I have my clients sign waivers, and, the doctor rules everything. So I went in, they opened him up. His bowel had already perforated, and he would have been dead in 48 hours. He actually almost died on the surgery table, but survived and lived another 20 years. This was about 20 years ago. And this is one thing an astrologer can do. Another thing is solve mystery cases. And I have had several doctors in my area contact me with unsolvable mystery cases. And so, especially the RNs and osteopaths and acupuncturists, they're very open to this, as are chiropractors. And I can tell some favorite cases later if you want, but you might have some more questions for me.
Well, yeah, or this is fascinating too. These stories are fascinating. Well, okay, so are there doctors that actually practice medical astrology?
Oh, yes, there are. And they do it quietly and secretly, but some of them write books. The Encyclopedia of Medical Astrology by Cornell is one everybody should have who's serious. He was a doctor. And there's a letter in his book saying the system was so marvelous, he wanted to spend the rest of his life lecturing at medical universities to try to get them to adopt this system. He wasn't successful.
Right.
But then there was Dr. William Davidson. Anything you can get on that man. His books are hard to find. They're little cardstock books that were printed up by his students. They recorded him secretly. He didn't allow them to record him. And they're some of the best medical astrology texts ever written. There's the Diaries of a Medical Astrologer by Ruth Millard? Margaret Millard, and I think she was an MD. There are medical doctors who practice this because I know them. One ran a clinic, and but secretly here. Because if you look at a chart, boy, it tells you everything. But you know who's really into this are psychologists. For years, there was a big psychology astrology conference called ISIS, put on by Barbara Morgan, a friend of mine. And she had psychologists and astrologers talking. You know, Jung,
Yeah.
he was studied astrology enough to read charts, and that's where he got his 4 types: fire, earth, air, water. And he was noted for saying that one look at the horoscope was equal to, I think he said, 18 sessions on the couch. You could tell so much. But I do know here in town licensed psychologists who also are astrologers. And I know that Liz Green studied psychology a great deal. It's very common. So some types of doctors are very interested. And I have had a few doctors, especially from India, but some from America here contact me, to either teach them. Some have come right in my office and had me teach them. I've taught for several groups of physicians secretly. Have them come in, and there's 10 of them, and I love doing that. And I'm writing right now for you interested out there. It should be out within the year. A very simple, very basic text for health practitioners from their point of view, getting rid of all the intense language, just showing them the methods that they can use simply and easily that work. And that'll be out very soon.
Well, okay, I have a question. I know, okay, going back to picking surgery dates and things like that, and I mean, obviously, being an astrologer, we always kind of look at the moon, the phases of the moon, full moon, you believe more. I've always heard, that, we kind of go by that kind of thing. But I've also heard that Saturn plays a big part in health in general. Can you kind of speak to that? Am I correct?
Oh, yes, Sally, you couldn't be more correct. In fact, the great iconic Dr. Davidson called Saturn the seat of disease, as I will call it in my book for health practitioners coming up. Saturn is always where we are cold. Saturn, medical astrology is based on the idea that the planets have temperature. It's all through vibration and photons and light particles. They have temperature, they have speed, they have color, they have a vibration. So Saturn is cold and slow and dark. Now, he has many positive qualities. For instance, he rules skeletal strength. Very strong men will be born, and women, with Saturn rising often. But Saturn will be the sign that it's in, the body, which represents body region, will be hypo-functioning often, lower in function, or cold. So what does that mean? That means you're going to lack circulation and oxygen to some degree. And so it can be the seat of disease. An area that's lacking oxygen and blood flow, circulation, or is tight, it's also tension, can lack nutrients. So it can get malnourished. It can start amassing toxins. You know, cancer often begins where Saturn is. This is a wonderful gift of information for your natal chart. But Saturn can also mean where a body part is too tense or the bones are too tight, like stenosis. Saturn has a lot to do with your skeletal system. So you look at where it is in the natal chart, and you also look where it is in the sky right now. So, you know, Sally, right now it's in Capricorn, the sign of the knees, the skin. And I don't know about you, but it's astonishing how many people I know just suddenly started getting knee problems this year and their knees giving out because, you know, so, you know, warm, Saturn's cold. So in the old days, you would warm the knees and you would warm the knees up, not cold packs. And you would, this is just tradition, and you would give the nutrient herbs that will, you know, help those knees. And very important information. You see,
Yeah.
information, and we get transit information.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, anybody coming down with, you know, strange little mole this year, you know, take it seriously. This is Saturn going through the sign of the skin, and it can, you know, be important knowledge. It's very ancient. You know, I always think when modern medicine developed rather suddenly, and they decided to suppress their own medical system that was just as complex and deep as anything in traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurveda. They decided to stamp it out, suppress it with a big campaign, so that all you hear about now is Renaissance medicine. That's just leeches and bleeding. That's all. Well, guess what? They use leeches and bleeding today in Chinese medicine, and everybody accepts that. They had some foolish superstitions, yes, but so do we today. What they did was throw the baby out with the bathwater. They decided, you know, we have antibiotics, and now we have, oh gosh, the circulation. We've discovered that. We know where the liver is now. So that means these old traditions must be all wrong. But these old traditions had a whole lot of knowledge that they just threw out.
What about say Mars? So if we're talking about, you know, a cold planet, what about hot planet? You know what, you know.
Excellent. In fact, you just said something I always teach by using Saturn and Mars because they're opposite. So you teach best by, here's cold, here's hot. You know, here's these opposite colors too. So Mars is another malefic, and he was considered another main source of disease. The difference is he's acute, whereas Saturn is chronic. So Mars will show you where you have inflammation due to heat. You can also have infection, invasion bacteria. Mars penetrates. So he's penetrating into the body, but he also penetrates from the inward out. So he's busy throwing out toxins. He throws things out. Whereas Saturn holds them in. Saturn's your barrier against attack. They're very opposite. So Mars is hot, and doctors know that inflammation causes a lot of diseases. But Mars also causes injury. And it's really funny how often you'll see a scar or a person's had surgery in the area, or infections in the area their Mars is in at birth. But once I discovered this, I stopped having the problem that I would have, you know, every time Mars came around to a certain point. I just would start cooling that area off and stop eating tomatoes and so forth. So Mars is acid, you know, he's very acid.
Wow, that's interesting. I'm just thinking about that's crazy.
It is.
Huh.
And you can just take anybody's chart out, and especially if Saturn or Mars are in the 6th, the 8th, or the 1st, or the 12th, or if they're afflicted. But even if they're not, and often just pinpoint these areas that are so troublesome. But there's a third troublesome area, which very few astrologers, if any, have addressed historically. and that's the position of the south node of the moon. Now, it has medical implications, especially in India, but I know that I'm pretty sure I'm the first to actually document in very great detail the medical implications of the south node by sign and by transit through the signs and by conjunction with various planets in the chart. And again, that's my medical astrology book. This one goes into this quite a bit, but there's also a book I have on the nodes that has a whole chapter on the medical nodes, and that's this book. For you node buffs, the lunar nodes, your key to excellent chart interpretation. It has everything. It has transits to the nodes, transits from the nodes, medical nodes, nodes by sign, nodes by house, and a big 60-page discourse on the difference between nodes east and west. And they're so important. But medically, the south node will be a point of deficiency or weakness in the body, or genetic illness, or psychological or supernatural problems. And the north node is often where things get, north node energy comes in, south node energy goes out. That's simple. So north node, you can get impactions, engorgement, excess tissue growth, or just a lot of power and strength. Strong area. South node, leaking. It's very similar to Neptune, you astrologers. Leaking, weakness, fatigue, strange undiagnosable conditions, or psychological depressions, things like that. So these are your important points, and anybody can learn to use these, Sally, but that doesn't mean you instantly become a medical astrologer.
No, that would be kind of dangerous.
Yeah, so I do have Medical Astrology 101 on my website. It's a little course where it teaches you with all four senses. It's extremely affordable. You do learn alone. There's no teacher involvement unless you're going for the certificate exam, but it really gets you in your shoes walking. There's 12 months, but it does take, medical astrology, you can take 30 years and not know everything. I don't know everything. I'm still asking questions, making discoveries. But we still have I always say, a wonderful telescope that you can look deeply into the human being, similar to a microscope or a telescope, or a CAT scan, but it's on the whole energetic pattern of the human being that, again, the Chinese and Ayurvedic practitioners recognize, but it stopped being recognized in the West here for various reasons at the time of the witch burnings. It's all related.
Yeah. So we've got so many unprecedented transits going on, in the next, through 2019 on, and they have been happening. Do you see anything other than this Saturn, Pluto, obviously, Uranus, and all this? Do you see any other transits that are going to really affect us medically?
Well, yeah, we always have to follow the eclipses. So the eclipses, as they go through a sign, they always amp up. Eclipses are like triple strength full of new moons. They're going to bring swelling, and the effects can last. Each eclipse can last a year or even more, and they're triggered. They don't necessarily happen on the day. They're triggered definitely within 3 months. They're triggered when planets come to the point of the eclipse, squaring, opposing, quincunxing. Especially Mars is a great trigger, and then the sun. But they're all very important. So you look at the eclipses have a north node, north pole, and a south pole. And again, I'm probably the first astrologer to talk extensively about the polarity of the nodes in eclipses. You don't just have an eclipse in Capricorn. You have a south node eclipse in Capricorn, or maybe a north node eclipse in Capricorn. This last one was a south node eclipse in Capricorn. And actually,
so for the viewers, we are recording this on January 15th. We just went through the new moon eclipse, and we are about to go through this full blood moon, supermoon eclipse in Leo on the 21st, and it will have already happened by the time we air this, and that'll be in Leo. So this will have already happened. So this will be very interesting for them to hear about. I just wanted to say that.
Yes, well, this is a North Node eclipse in Leo with the South Node end and the Sun, or the eclipse master, in Aquarius. So it's a power outage on the Aquarius end and a power surge on the Leo end. Now, I actually have a book that documents the medical outcome of all eclipses in whatever sign, and has a whole medical section and a cautious section for each eclipse, and that is Eclipses and You. And Eclipses and You, the beautiful, beautiful cover by the wonderful astrologer Tony Howe. And he designed it. It's just beautiful. And I have an eclipse calendar in the back, the first in history that gives the node, the polarity of the eclipse. Is it a north node eclipse or is it a south node eclipse? And you can see influences on medically for everyone, or generally speaking. So, Sally, you wanted to know about the upcoming eclipse in Leo. Well, Leo and Aquarius govern, Leo's the heart, and Aquarius is the circulatory system. So we know there's a big impact on the heart and the circulatory system. Aquarius has also a lot to do with the venous circulation. Aquarius it's also an eclipse that influences the back and the lower leg. Those are the two structural areas. So if you have someone who's a heart patient, this is no time to release them from the hospital, or to go, let's go heavy lifting. I feel great. You have a person with a weak heart, this is not the time to go heavy lifting. Why? A few days on either side of that eclipse, you're having a tremendous power surge into the area of the heart and a power outage, the veins getting weaker. You have to have a balanced arterial and venous system. If somebody has an aneurysm, this is also dangerous because things could swell. So, and doctors have things that can reduce this. In herbology, there are herbs such as sage and yarrow and cayenne that can reduce embolisms, can equalize circulation. Rosemary's good for equalizing circulation. So, in the old days, and traditionally, the old herbalists would see this coming up. And if they had somebody who had problems, they would preempt it with by a week or two, start putting them on herbs to strengthen the weakness, to reduce the swelling. And also in India and some Native American tribes, various peoples around the world go inside during eclipses. They don't go out view. It's considered very dangerous. You go inside, you shutter all the shades, you cover all the water, and you can put a holy basil leaf or tulsi leaf into the water afterwards to purify. The electrical charges get off in eclipses. Try not to drink water that's been exposed to an eclipse. But this is another story. But you can watch the eclipses go around. Now, if they are conjoined a planet in your chart, that might be important to health if it's a planet that has been giving you health issues. So they don't always manifest medically. They're very interesting, these eclipses, Sally. And of course, the one we just had is in the sign of the knees and the skin, and also somewhat drying to the mucous membrane. So that was the one January 5th in the United States. I think it was just.
It's very funny because as soon as that eclipse happened, my face broke out on this side. I have no idea why. It never does that. My face just broke out on this side. I just assumed it's because I've been putting on makeup doing these interviews. But I've had so many strange breakouts since that.
Well, there's another key is that Capricorn rules the gallbladder. That's another thing. And it rules the gallbladder and the skin and the knees. It has a big influence over the opposite side, mucous membrane, the stomach. So, it's cold and drying. So if you went to an old time Renaissance doctor, they would, oh, you're breaking out in Saturn and the South Node and Pluto are in Capricorn. And then they would interpret, then they look at your whole chart and they would figure out from their paradigm what was causing the breakouts. And maybe the skin's lacking some protection. Maybe you're getting toxins in your body that are needing to come out. Maybe your gallbladder's not functioning well enough. You know, they would look at all these things, and then they would give you an herbal potion. And you know, these men were not fools. They were some, if you read their diaries and their works, they were great geniuses. To be honest, they were master herbalists, master astrologers, and master diagnosticians. They would look at your sweat, your urine, and people don't know this, but the ancient system coming up, you know, in the West had pulse and tongue diagnosis, which Matthew Wood goes into in his works, the great herbalist Matthew Wood. So we had tongue and pulse, we had urine diagnosis, feces diagnosis, sweat. Then they looked at your body types. And I almost never get a chance to show my books, so I'm taking full advantage here. But this is one of my books, and almost all of my books are Dave's top 10 books or have won various awards. So this is the astrological body types.
That is a great book.
It's kind of funny too. It's illustrated by moi with probably over 100 illustrations of planetary types, sign types, the modal types, and plus all the statistical research we did, genetic research, also medical nodes, all kinds of things. A very nice book. It's a great book for beginners who like cartoons, but it's also
that is one of my favorite books, and I didn't realize that you had done you'd done most of the illustrations, and they're all of the illustrations, right?
You know what's funny about that, Sally, is I've done all the illustrations and it says so right on the front. The same for some of my other books, and yet nobody ever gets that I've done the illustrations. I don't know why. It's like a total, just absolute cloud over it, but you know, it says right there. But
I didn't really realize that. But that is such a good book. It's so it's very true. I mean, it's uncanny. I mean, it's really uncanny.
It is funny, and I should say, which I reiterate in the book, about a third of people are pretty good representation of their sun sign, about a third of their moon sign, and about a third of their ascendant sign. But the strongest planets in the chart, like the planets on the ascendant, the planet maybe conjunct your sun, are also very strong in a person's character. And there's a little chart showing you how to tell planetary strength. You know, but yeah, they used to line up outside at Powell's. A friend of mine had the book section at Powell's metaphysical section. She was in theology next door, and she could see the metaphysical section. And she said that there's always a cluster around that book of young people giggling. And oh, there's my side. There's Joe. But it's actually a kind of an important book, and it goes into the vocations that go with those careers and that look as well.
Yeah. You're amazing. You're amazing. You're so entertaining, but you're the body of your work is so I mean, we could have like 4 more interviews and still not be able to even to touch on all of the things that you've done. But today was about medical astrology, and I'll stay focused on that. So I highly recommend that you get in touch with Judith. Judith, you generously you're giving our viewers a gift. You want to tell them a little bit about that?
Yes, I just asked my webmaster to put it up, and hopefully he will on time.
We're going to have a link.
Yeah, it's a little audio about medical astrology in the heart disease, heart problems, and little audio. I think it's 30 minutes or 45 minutes long. And
perfect.
I might put up my own history of medicine. I have a timeline with things nobody ever hears about. Like Yeah, it's all the things nobody hears about, like how the British Parliament voted to shut women, to prevent all women physicians from practicing, and so forth, and how Jewish women were allowed to practice because they were specialists in eye medicine in Europe, and even some Jewish women were allowed to treat some kings and so forth, which is very unusual in this climate. And so there's just, and then just some very, very amazing things that just nobody has in their medical timelines. And I might have him post that.
That's cool. That's very cool. Yeah, if you can, that's great. If you can't, everybody understands. Everybody's under a time crunch.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this interview. It's been such a blessing, and such a blessing getting to know you. And I can't thank you enough.
Oh, well, thank you, Sally. And it's been a really great honor and pleasure to be able to introduce this subject to your audience and your people. And thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, yeah. I feel like we're going to be friends for a long time.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Happy New Year, everyone, and prepare your knees.
Take care of your knees. Take care of your heart. Okay. Bye-bye.